Okay, this is a story we've been following very closely all week because it appeared that we were on the cusp of yet another 2023 major winner making the jump over to LIV. But just as of this morning, just a couple of hours ago, we've got confirmation that that deal has, quote, fallen through. But this leaves us wondering a lot of things. First of all, what does that mean for LIV's ability to poach those big names? You know, just like they got off the back of Jon Rahm. What does that mean for PGA Tour and its retention? And what does this mean for Jon Rahm, who's trying to build a team with just a few weeks left before the season kicks off? Because Wyndham was supposed to be the big name who was headed to Jon Rahm's team. There is a lot for us to unpack here, Mike. And we're going to talk in a few minutes. Like, we're going to talk about this first, but we're also going to get into Jon Rahm's team and there's another big story on the back end of this, and it has to do with some really big up-and-coming names as well, not just the established names,
right,
like we saw with Wyndham Clark. But let's go back a little bit and talk about like where this all started and where we were, like I said, kind of patiently waiting and just kind of waiting to see how this plays out. Was there are a couple of accounts that have kind of been at the forefront of breaking a lot of the LIV news. Flushing It was one of them. There's a couple others. And largely what these accounts are is they're run by ex-tour players or people who are very close to the tour. So they're speaking to these guys directly. And we have to now give them that credibility because, like I said, they're the ones who spoke out about the Rahm deal.
Yeah, they nailed it on the Rahm deal.
Way before the rest of us, right? So when we start to see that, we got to say, okay, we can't just let this run by as another rumor. So the rumor was that Jon Rahm, building out his team, was reaching for Wyndham Clark, who was the 2023 U.S. Open winner. And no denying, that would have been a huge grab.
Huge grab. I thought it was a lock, to be honest with you. You know, like for a guy like Clark, whose stock was hot, you know, like this is the time to go to LIV for him.
It certainly seemed like a lock, and we're going to talk about why we're kind of surprised that it wasn't.
Right.
Because of the fact that it seemed like only upside for Wyndham if he was to go. But keep this one thing in mind, and this is, we talk about like where LIV just seems to be, as we get no updates on this merger and them coming together, it just seems like LIV is just trying to, you know, put its foot down like on the back of the PGA Tour and just like pin them in a position where they have more leverage, and doing that through these huge signings. It's kind of crazy if you think about it on paper. If they had pulled in Wyndham Clark, and this is why this was such big news this week, they would have had 3 out of the 4 current major winners.
That's wild.
You got Brooks Koepka, who's PGA Championship winner, Jon Rahm, Masters champion, Wyndham Clark, U.S. Open winner. So there's no denying that would have changed things.
Yeah, no, definitely it would have been huge news and great news for LIV. And it makes you also think the other major winner was Brian Harman. He had a similar year than Clark. You know, they made the Ryder Cup together. His stock is hot. I'm sure he got an offer too, but his name's been silent in all this. So I'm wondering why the Clark kind of came out. Why did his name come up? Was he that close to going? How close was he?
Right.
You know?
And I got to think, based on the reports, there was a lot of similar words that were used to the Jon Rahm deal. I look for words like deal imminent was being said. So it's hard because it's all done behind closed doors. It's not public negotiations. So it's hard to understand why it fell through. But keeping that in mind, like I got to look to like, what was the motivation for Wyndham? What was the motivation for LIV, right? And to me, it just makes sense that if LIV is going to throw some big money around, it's going to be to go after major winners.
Sure.
Because
smart play.
And what's their hugest Achilles heel is still official world golf rankings. Now, again, we could do a whole separate note on this and break this down, but we're seeing LIV is creeping closer and closer to opportunities for their players to get official world golf rankings. We saw that in the DP World Tour. A lot of LIV guys playing towards the end of last year in DP World Tour events and getting those rankings. But take just Wyndham for an example, and he's just the current U.S. Open winner. You can definitely go back a year or two and still have this at play. So something to understand and think of, U.S. Open winner, that gives you a 10-year exemption into the U.S. Open. So for a decade, Wyndham is in the field.
And he's 30, by the way. So that would take him to, I don't want to call it the end of his career, but in golf, pretty close.
Largely the end of his effective career, right? You also get a 5-year exemption into the Masters, the Open Championship, and the PGA
So
Championship.
he has every major till he's 35.
Right.
Okay.
So 5 years worth of majors exempted. To me, I'm thinking those are the guys. Those are the low-hanging fruit to go to LIV, because the guys who might be on the fence are your non-major winners, the guys who are wanting to still be in those majors each year.
Right.
Guy like this, he's exempt. He could just go. He could play,
It's 20 events over those 5 years. Think about it. Four majors a year times
Yeah.
5. If he wins one of them, it restarts the clock.
Right.
It's crazy.
And
Unless they
now,
change that rule, which could be something else.
that's something that nothing, I guess, is guaranteed.
Right.
There's always the ability, and they've left the door open. The majors could change what they're
Right.
considering their status to get in, but I don't see, it's not trending that way. It hasn't happened yet. It didn't happen at the height of the conflict between these two. Makes me think it's probably not going to happen necessarily now.
Right.
But it's a very interesting thing to think, like, where they're setting their sights. But like, again, why did something like this fall through? So the reason we found out, and the way we found out that it had fallen through, was that Wyndham Clark, he announced that he was committing to the American Express, therefore staying on the PGA Tour. And the same accounts that were talking about the deal and the potential for the deal to happen came out and said that the negotiation had fallen through. But there was no expansion on it beyond that. There was no reason specifically that was said. So let's just kind of surmise what this deal might have looked like.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. Knowing the money that Rahm got, and Rahm is a huge needle mover. He's a guy who's it's not a one and done type of major winner. And I'm not trying to imply that Wyndham is a one and done kind of major winner.
No,
but
But I think when you sign Rahm, you also sign the fans of Spain. I feel like, Wyndham is not really a big enough name here.
Right. Well, internationally, no doubt. We've talked about how they're going after that international schedule. But the reality is Wyndham Clark has not had the kind of, years in previous years that Jon Rahm has had. He's just not in the same position as Jon Rahm. That being said, still being a major winner, a current major winner, and what that could do for continuing to turn the tide for LIV's favor. And you guys weigh in the comments if you have an idea of what you think that deal might have looked like. Mm-hmm. But I got to guess, and tell me if I'm wrong here, minimum of a $50 million signing bonus.
Yeah, I'd say 50 minimum.
And I would put it somewhere in the range of $50 to $100 million that he was probably offered.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. I mean, but we don't know how these deals are structured. I mean, if it was 50, maybe it's 50 over the next 6 years. Maybe there's a thing about it. Maybe it's not all up front. And then maybe that's the reason. I'm trying to still, scratch my head of why he did not take this deal.
Right. Well,
could he make more on the PGA Tour?
That's just the thing. Could you have made more? But the one thing I will say is that the LIV money is still the only, in this space, guaranteed money. Now, you could argue that there are some going to be PGA Tour no-cut events with big purses that are effectively, in a way, guaranteed money, but there's still a variability. If you come in last place, it's nothing like first place.
Yep.
And you still got to qualify into those events. LIV, if it's a signing bonus, it's a signing bonus. To me, that's just the icing on top. That's guaranteed money, but being on LIV, the structure of it, the team play, basically it makes everybody rich.
It does.
The way down. We saw that.
The Chase Koepka model.
Chase Koepka, the joking that happened early on with Pat Perez getting so rich off of it and not, playing particularly well in that moment. So there's a lot with that. So it leads me to think okay, so why otherwise turn down this deal, right? And there's one other thing that's been constant was the stigma attached, right? So
of course,
there was plenty of guys, whether you agree with them or not, who were concerned with what this would do for their career. There was guys who were worried about, would this put their Hall of Fame potential in jeopardy? Would this, sully their name in some way? Well, I got to say that I think that that's another thing that's been largely put on the shelf since the Rahm signing genuinely across the board changed the rhetoric we were hearing from
everyone.
Right.
Yep.
So now all of a sudden you had guys like Rory McIlroy really coming out in a large way, maybe in defense is a stretch, but saying words like, got to see Rahm at the Ryder
Ryder
Cup,
Cup.
and just saying like I understand and respect his decision. And then Phil Mickelson, we did a whole show about this, talking about how Phil came to like kind of bat for him. So there's one thing we can say undeniably is there's nowhere near the stigma that there was not too long ago.
No, things have seemed, like we said, to calm down a little bit after Rahm. Rahm was the I think the final piece that I think we all needed to say, okay, maybe this thing is legit, and maybe these two sides will come together. They're still talking. That deal has not been reached yet, so that's still hanging over one's head. Maybe that's the reason why Wyndham turned this down. But I don't know, man. I mean, I think there's a lot of backing behind LIV right now, and clearly, man, this thing is only getting stronger and stronger, and I think these guys see it.
Right. But that being said, there is a way you can read this as being a pretty significant loss on the LIV side as well. You know, LIV is getting stronger. LIV, you know, we're seeing it, like I said, in the news, and the way we saw recently with Phil Mickelson talking about some of their revenue model changing.
Yep.
We talked about, we heard for the first time on the Pat McAfee show, which we hadn't really heard elsewhere, that LIV is now getting paid by the travel bureaus of some of these countries that want to bring it in and bring in tourism.
Yeah.
So there's that. But there is the side of it where we're now looking at Jon Rahm's coming closer and closer to that first event at Mayakoba, and where this could have been a huge marquee signing, and for whatever reason, it did not happen.
Yeah.
It fell through. So it to me means that just having a blank checkbook is not enough on LIV's side, and they've
Right.
got to do something else. And now maybe it's that these guys have a little bit of a grievance with the structure. We just saw, and again this week, it just kind of hit the news with Jon Rahm is potentially getting his way in some ways, in that Jon Rahm wanted to see a bigger field, and we're seeing that possible expansion this time, you know, this week.
Yeah.
John also, though, wanted a fourth round put in. Haven't seen him move the needle on that just yet.
Right.
So maybe there could be a certain degree of that was potentially the gripe of on the side of Wyndham Clark. But to me, I think one of the biggest thing that you got to look into, and I think this is part of what weighs into that, and we kind of hinted at this in a previous episode. We kind of guessed that this is where it was going. As part of, if I'm a current major winner, I've got a huge LIV offer on my desk. I'm a current PGA Tour member, and I'm exempt into the, you know, I've got punched my ticket into the signature events, and I'm looking at both, and I'm like, where do I go? Yes, there's a lot of guaranteed money on the side of LIV, but the reality is there's a lot of money everywhere right now.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm looking at this PGA Tour schedule over the next, what is it, 2.5 months.
Yeah.
You have almost 5 events,
Right.
all with a purse of 20 million or more. The reality is there's probably never been a better time to be a top 25 player than
No
right
doubt.
now, because the reality is, no matter where you are, you're making generational wealth.
Yeah, no doubt. There's no doubt about it. There's a lot of money flying around, and I was so blown away by the where'd Wyndham finish? He finished T29 at the Century and made 140 grand. I mean, some of these like non-cut events, these private events in Hawaii, these guaranteed money events with no cut. There's a lot of money to be made on the tour, and he wins once in a regular I shouldn't call it regular, in an elevated event, a designated event.
Right.
It's a ton of money.
And you know, this was done in response to LIV. Like, we saw the purses jump up from the biggest purses being 9 million to 20 million seemingly overnight.
Yeah.
And this was why it was done. It was done to level the playing field. It was done where there wasn't as big of a disparity, where a guy like, and again, we're guessing at this $50 million number. A guy like Wyndham might be saying, okay, I make 50 here. And it was no longer like this huge tipping of the scales where it's 50 million or maybe 2 or 3 million over here.
Right.
It's more like getting closer now with the PGA Tour. And if you really want to dig deeper into that, if you start to think about what sponsors might you lose by going to LIV? And I'm not even talking about for the stigma anymore. Now, as LIV moves to a new model where they're going to have team apparel sponsors and things like that, who knows? What do those sponsor deals look like? And what is the negotiations going behind the scenes? Like, you may lose this here. All I'm saying is it's starting to look a little bit more like this for these guys who are top tier, top echelon guys.
Yeah.
They're now making money no matter where they go.
I know.
Right? They're making that money.
I know.
And again, his exemptions from that major win guarantee that he'll be in the opportunity to make that money. So,
I mean, they're going to ask him, I'm sure, this week at the American Express. I'm sure there's someone in that press room who's going to say, we heard you were taking a deal. Why didn't you take it? He's got to answer it.
there's
So
no
we're
doubt.
going to hear his reason.
But I worry that what you're going to get from that reasoning is some sort of just a very blank statement.
Very agent-written statement.
Right. The reality is, and I think if any of these guys were to speak bluntly, it might be something more to the effect of, you now look at both schedules. The LIV schedule, although is not as commitment of number of events, you have to be there. Phil Mickelson talked about the policy of saying for sponsors and for fans, they're guaranteeing that guys are going to be there.
Yep.
You're traveling all over the world.
Yep.
That is a very global league. On the PGA Tour side, you may look at it and say there's certain events that suit me, and I know I can play well there. I know I can win there.
Right.
You may want to stick around for that. But the concern that will continue to come back to for me, and then this is something that we've talked about here, and I'm going to beat this drum until, somebody whether something happens one way or the other. My concern is we are now reaching this point where the arms race of money between these two tours is going to create some very, very, very rich golfers.
Yes.
That's true.
What
does it do for the long-term sustainability of the game?
Right.
We just saw it last week. The Wells Fargo and Farmers Insurance both dropping out as sponsors because we're getting to a point where there's only a very select few amount of companies that are going to be able to pay that big elevated signature event purse.
Right. Yeah. It's crazy. I mean, just to think about where this is all going to go. I mean, obviously, like I said before, once this deal gets announced, I think we're going to have more clarity. But I mean, even these PGA Tour events, my biggest gripe with them is, there's still cuts. They're still not guaranteed money. Yes, there's 25, 20, whatever it is, million on the line. But if I'm like Joe Schmo and I can barely make cuts, it's hard, man.
Yes,
it's
Joe
hard
Schmoes,
to make a living.
I totally get that. The guys who are fighting on that cut line.
But then I'm more concerned. So I guess where I'm going with that is I'm concerned about what's the future for those guys. Are they ever going to have a chance? Or is the farm system of golf dying?
There's no denying that we could see a kind of a separation there, and we even saw some gripes recently. The guys talking about not getting into the signature events, and that's where the money is, and Justin Thomas kind of saying well, play better. It's really what we're really doing is we're taking the pool of guys who are making the money. It seems to be getting a little bit smaller and smaller. Yeah. But again, I just worry about where that money is going to come from to support that. And I think that's really, honestly, one of the biggest things that's holding up this whole deal from happening is that now as this arms race continued of money, the tour, the PGA Tour, LIV obviously, they've got that back in the PIF, which seems like an unlimited supply of money. But on the PGA Tour side, the pressure is on to make that deal with those key core investors. And that's where they're looking to, this Boston Sports Group and others, because they're going to rely on them because you're going to run out of sponsors. Like the old model of having an event sponsor who can put up that purse is just dropping off so quickly. So the other big thing, though, that we have to dig into, though, is okay, so on the LIV side, where does this leave everything with Jon Rahm and his team?
Does he even have a team with a few weeks to go?
So same type of sources are reporting who might go, but I think there's one really big indication in there that could really show, like you talked about, these up-and-coming golfers. They're, in a lot of ways, the future of golf. We know who the big names are right now, but where's the future?
Yeah.
And where's the future going to play?
Exactly.
And I think this other Jon Rahm signing that we have to talk about is going to be one of those things that's going to indicate that. And it goes into a much bigger picture of the way sports has been going in general with the amount of money floating around. Yeah. So we're going to take a quick break. We're going to do a word from our sponsors. Then we're going to come back. We got to talk about that team because it's so important.
Big thanks to FootJoy. We've been using FootJoy, been wearing FootJoy for years now, and they're always innovating. They're coming out with apparel that works in all different elements. And we've been talking about Thermo Series for the cold, but we can't skip over their Hydro Series for the rain and the wet. Mm-hmm. I mean, they thought of everything. And the Hydro Series line of rain jackets, they're designed to protect players in everything from light mists to those torrential downpours. And they have this Dry Joys waterproof technology. In fact, I have one right here. If you're watching the show, you'll see it. I love these jackets. I just pulled this out of the box today. I mean, This is the thinnest thing ever. I mean, Frank, feel this material. It's incredible.
Oh, I know, because one of these lives in my golf bag.
Exactly.
And in Myrtle Beach, I pulled it out plenty of times.
I know, the green one, right?
Yeah,
It basically just, this is the size it like folds up to, and you could take it off and you can kind of, layer up, layer down accordingly. And it's the ultimate protection, no matter the condition you're in or where you live. Check out the Hydro Series, because I don't care where you live. It's going to rain somewhere. It's going to be wet somewhere, and you're going to wish you had this in your bag. So go check out the whole lineup at footjoy.com.
And guys, you've heard us speak about it before, but like I had just this past summer, I got the opportunity to get fit for the new Titleist T-Series irons, and it's just been, it's been a real, I mean, we throw this word around, but it's the truth. It's been a game changer for me, especially being able to blend that set. Just whether you go with the T100s, the T150s, T200s, T300s, the good news is they all just kind of work together.
Yeah.
And they're the similar look. It's, it's not like being able to like where you have two different types of clubs in your hand. And why that matters is, especially in my case, when I was going through it, was just being able to dial in those different distances. I really lean on my T150s for then all those 8-iron shots, those 9-iron shots, those really like where I want to throw a dart into a green. And then where I needed a little bit more ball speed, the 7-iron and up, I was able to get into those T200s. It just jumps off the face. It's forgiving. So I think there's a lot that can be done there, but more importantly, it's just understanding what a good fitting can do for you, because you'll be able to go through that bag, find those kind of weaknesses in your game, and really, like I said, lean on the clubs to kind of do that heavy lifting for you. And the T Series, they've got that enhanced feel, that improved turf interaction, which is something you got to feel to really understand. But really what it ends up with is just a more consistent strikes, I'm finding, through the bag. So go to Titleist.com. Check out that new T-Series, browse through them, see what the different options are, but then go into a fitting with an open mind and just hit them, try them, because like I said, it's no one fit for anybody, but where really the rubber meets the road is the ability to blend these sets together and really find the right thing for your game. So visit Titleist.com, check them out, and make sure, do yourself a favor and schedule yourself a fitting this summer. Okay, so getting right into it, talking about Jon Rahm's team, the other big signing that's being talked about now, and this is, again, coming from a lot of those same types of sources. So is there a possibility it won't happen? Absolutely. But we look at these things and we kind of look at indications for how viable they are. And this one looks like it's very possible. So for Jon Rahm's team, Caleb Surratt, right? What's interesting about him is that he is the first guy, I think, since Justin Thomas to win the SEC championship as a freshman. Now, he's a kid. He's a young guy.
19, right?
19 years old. Played in the 2023 Walker Cup. Freshman, University of Tennessee. But perhaps most importantly, he's the 10th ranked amateur in the world right now. And it's looking like he's going to be the next person announced on Jon Rahm's team.
Wouldn't you at that age?
In a lot of ways, yes.
I mean, come on.
And I think this is something that's so, although the name may not be a name you're familiar with, although it may not be a household name.
But no one was in the beginning, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And he's certainly not the publicity draw that Wyndham Clark would have been. But if you listen to the words that coming out of the mouths of the guys from LIV, you start to make more and more sense why you'd see something like this.
Yeah.
Again, I got to go back to, because the first real time we've seen him speak candidly in long form in quite a while was Phil Mickelson, Pat McAfee show. He talked about a lot of these teams are thinking themselves long, especially the team owners, right? So remember, Jon Rahm, part of his deal is his team ownership.
Yeah.
The value of his deal goes up as the value of his team goes up.
Sure.
As an owner, it makes sense for him to bring in and develop players they see with a lot of potential. Phil Mickelson talked about where at least his team, and he didn't want to speak for other teams, but he said, like, this is kind of the model. They're going to be developing their own training facilities, no different than you see like in the NFL where the Jets have their training facilities, the Giants have their training, right? Having that training facilities where they can come in and develop players, because they also, the player benefits, but they also benefit because remember, it's a team environment, team winnings, things like that. To have a guy like Caleb come in see the potential in him and think I can develop this guy, and even possibly in a Jon Rahm or a guy who's Jon Rahm's not old, but in an older case, I'm 10 years, I'm out of the league, but I'm still an owner.
Right.
This guy hits his prime, I'm making money off of him.
Exactly.
Type of thing. But I guess where the debate then leads is, and it's something that's like Taylor's oldest time was generally across all sports, should you stay in college or should you make the jump? Right. 19 years old, 1 year of college, leaves college and goes and plays, on LIV and then on LIV Tour. I would imagine he's not getting a huge signing bonus. He may be getting something.
Maybe.
I would imagine still pulling names. The guys who don't just qualify into LIV from that qualifying event, they may throw $250,000 at him. Something to get him started. But
which is a lot more than PGA Tour rookies.
Right. And it still comes down to LIV money, even if it's not a signing bonus, it's in a lot of ways all but guaranteed. So what I mean by that is, again, go back, look at Chase Koepka, look at James Piot. You know what I mean? These are guys who made themselves $10 to $25 million in a season or two in the team environment, where when the team wins, you take home something.
Right.
And if I'm, in a lot of ways, like if I put myself in the shoes, if I'm Caleb's parents and helping him guide him through this decision, I got to say that I think, and I'm not in that situation, so I'm not 100% sure, but I think my decision would be to push him towards going pro, going into LIV.
Yeah, I mean, it's the golden egg. It's the golden goose. It's what all golfers want. They want to play pro tour and make money.
Right.
So this carrot's being dangled in front of you, which seems like an easy grab at 19 years old.
Right.
Think about all these guys who come out of college and they're grinding and they're still paying tournament fees and they're on the road and they're missing cuts. It's a tough life.
Yeah.
If this carrot's dangling in front of you, I mean, I don't see why you would turn that down.
And look, to a certain
play with
extent,
Jon Rahm.
With sports in general being so unpredictable as they are, anybody could get injured, end a career.
Yeah.
Things like that can happen. To me, I'm kind of the indication, if money is there in your face, like take the money, especially for a kid like this, take the money, and then you could always go back to college in the future if you want to finish your degree. You can do those types of things.
You can learn while you're playing LIV.
Right.
You can.
There's a lot of things
online
you can do.
courses.
No, but you get what I'm saying. Like, if he takes, whereas we made the argument earlier in the show of how for the top tier guys who are getting the big offers, who are also in the signature events and all that stuff, the playing field is getting more and more level. It's the opposite is true with the brand new guys like this, a top 10 amateur, where if the LIV opportunity is there, the scales are still tipped in the LIV side. Because even if he was to make his way onto the PGA Tour, as we know, there's a lot of competition there. There's a lot of grind. A lot of the guys who are in a similar position and amateur status who are trying to make it. And beyond that, now you're fighting with all the tour guys to make it your way into the signature events where the big money is.
Yeah.
So a guy like Caleb might make his way on. He might play in some non-signature events here and there, maybe win $1 million here or there.
Yeah.
He could go to LIV. He could make $1 million in a weekend and not even necessarily play well. His team just wins.
Exactly.
And what better opportunity you have to win than playing on Jon Rahm's team?
I know. I mean, all the pieces are there for success.
Right.
So that's why it seems like a no-brainer for this kid and for other kids, of his, position. Which I think we're going to see more and more of. I mean, it's part of their business model, I'm sure, LIV. Go after the major winners. Go after up-and-coming college, top amateurs.
It seems like that's like the plan of LIV right now. If I'm looking from the outside looking in, it might be there's two places. Go after the top tier guys, shot in the dark. If offer them a big paycheck.
The lightning in the bottle guys.
Right.
Yep.
And you get them, and then it's a huge conversation point. It's publicity. It's pressure on the PGA Tour. You get one of those guys. Or vice versa on the other side.
Where you get them.
You don't have to spend necessarily as much money up front, but you take, again, lightning in a bottle. Maybe one of these guys is the next whoever.
Right.
Maybe Caleb is the next Justin Thomas, and he's playing on your tour. Right?
But can he ever become that?
That's a great question.
But that's great. But no one's going to become the next anybody at LIV. That's what people are probably saying. Like, yeah, go ahead, take the money, but you're never going to become the next Rory McIlroy because no one's going to know about you. No one's going to be able to watch you.
I mean, it depends. Like
he wins $50 million, Caleb Surratt, on LIV this year.
Yes, I get what you're saying, but like as LIV grows, its its fan base and whatever, and it enters that conversation. And we talked about before, like it being more and more validated by voices like Rory. If a person was over there and they were just winning like crazy, all of a sudden, hey, who's this? Look, think about Taylor.
About Taylor Gooch, but still, I mean, he's still not top of the world, biggest name. He won 40-something million. He's having a great life.
I can't disagree with you. There was going to be that conversation. If a guy's winning like crazy over there, it's still not necessarily going to be like the next whoever on the PGA Tour. In a lot of ways, a lot of people will say that. But like Phil Mickelson said in his go back to his interview again, he said, don't forget, we're a startup. We still have a long way to go. Who knows what the visibility of LIV might be and the quote unquote credibility of LIV might be in 2 to 3 years. Where I can say though, the counterpoint, there's always a counterpoint to everything. And the counterpoint here is a guy like Caleb goes into LIV and is not making official world golf rankings and is not getting into major fields and is therefore not winning majors. Mm-hmm. There, it becomes a tougher conversation to a guy like, again, we're just using this loose comparison, Justin Thomas, has won a major. You know what I mean? There, you got a certain extent, like if you are a guy like Caleb and you take that guaranteed money,
you better play well.
You better play well over there, and you better kind of, at least in your mind, reserve the possibility that you're not playing in majors.
Yes, or anywhere else.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, so there's certain guys like that are taking a more significant gamble that the tours are going to come together in some way. Because I think the winning scenario for somebody like Caleb would be he gets on Jon Rahm's team, makes himself some good money over 2-3 years. He's got his foot in the door. The tours merge, and now he's just playing professionally on whatever that new circuit is.
Right.
But without that, there is something still to consider.
Yeah, there really is.
So, as we always say, weigh in the comments. Let us know what you think. If you were in this position, where would you go, or where would you advise if it was your kid who was on 19 years old and kind of torn between the two? What's the upside in either direction? No matter what, it's an interesting conversation. It's a dynamic that feels like it's changing constantly. Yeah. So we'll be here to continue covering it, constantly. So make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast. This was certainly some big news. This is certainly a big one to kind of digest. So let us know what you think in the comments, and we'll see you in the next show.